Hello, and welcome to The Critique. Today we're reviewing a video commentary script. Graham Allen calls out Candace Owens' lies about Erika Kirk, which dives into a pretty intense public feud.
It's definitely a heavy piece. You've got these huge allegations flying around. Defamation, murder, pedophilia, all framed with this religious lens.
It's high stakes, for sure, high emotion, and you can tell the author's really passionate about it.
Oh, absolutely. But despite that passion, I think we both felt the engine kind of stall.
Right at the beginning.
We did.
Let's just jump straight in there. It feels like the placement of the promotional material for the author's book creates a lot of friction, and it happens right after the narrative hook.
That's exactly it. The script opens with a bang. I mean, you have this high-stakes summary of the conflict. Graham Allen is responding to being called a PDF file, which is, internet slang for a predator.
It's a huge accusation.
Huge. So the tension is there in the first two sentences. I was ready. I was leaning in. And then the whole thing just grinds to a halt for this long, almost apologetic plug for the author's book, The Path of an Eagle.
It's so jarring. You go from Graham Allen is fighting for his reputation to, by the way, my audiobook is coming out. And it just completely deflates that tension.
Right. The weakness is really a loss of narrative velocity. The listener is expecting a fight, or at least a defense, and what they get is a commercial break.
It's like watching a thriller, and right as the bad guy pulls out a knife, the hero turns to the camera and tries to sell you a watch. It breaks the spell.
I do get the instinct, though. The author is probably thinking, okay, I have to put this at the start. That's when viewer retention is highest, They worry if they put it at the end, nobody will see it.
That's a valid concern for maybe a marketer, but it is a fatal error for a storyteller, because if you lose the audience's interest with the plug, they're not going to be there for the content or for the book.
So the suggestion is really to just prioritize the story.
Exactly. You either have to relocate the promotional segment to the end, or you have to weave it thematically into the commentary. You have to maintain that forward momentum.
Okay, so let's get specific. What are the concrete options here? Because just saying move it might feel like we're telling them to bury their marketing.
Well, let's look at two ways to do it. Option A is the simple, clean relocation. Just move that whole section about the path of an eagle to the very end.
As a sign-off.
As a sign-off. The script could end with something like, if you want to know more about how to lead after being knocked down, like we saw Graham doing here, check out my book. It feels like a natural next step, not an interruption.
I like that. It respects the audience's time. But okay, what if the author is just dead set on keeping it up front? Is there any way to make that work?
There is, and that's option B, thematic integration. If the plug has to stay early, then you tie it directly to the content. So instead of a hard break, you say something like, Graham is demonstrating real resilience here, which is actually a topic I covered in my book, The Path of an Eagle.
Oh, that's good.
Specifically about how to lead after being knocked down.
See, that makes the plug feel like analysis, not like a commercial.
Exactly. It changes the whole dynamic from buy my product to I am an expert on this subject, so listen to my take. It actually builds the author's authority instead of spending it.
Right. It tells the audience the book is relevant to the story they actually clicked on. That really does smooth out that friction.
It does. So, okay, once we get past that and into the actual meat of the script, the author uses a very specific framework. They call it a biblical lens.
Yeah, and that leads right into the second big issue. The script suffers from this really jarring dissonance between its theological arguments and its colloquial insults.
This was the thing that stood out most to me, too. On one hand, the author is citing specific scripture. John 15:18, 2 Corinthians 4:4.
Very serious stuff. They're framing the whole conflict as spiritual warfare against a demonic entity. That's an elevated, very serious tone.
But then, in the very next breath, the antagonist is called a dingbat, a nut job, and they keep using this nickname, Candy, to, belittle her.
It's a massive tonal clash. The weakness here is that mixing high-minded scripture with low-brow name-calling just confuses the author's entire ethos. You can't claim the moral high ground while you're slinging mud from the gutter.
It completely undermines the gravity of what you're saying. When you use a word like dingbat, you go from being a spiritual commentator to like a schoolyard bully. It makes the whole analysis feel like a costume for a personal grudge.
Yeah. If you call someone demonic, that's a theological claim. It requires a certain seriousness. But if you call them a dingbat, it just sounds like a cartoon. I do wonder, though, are they maybe trying to be relatable?
It's possible, but I think in this context, it backfired. The audience for this kind of content, a biblical breakdown of a public feud, they're likely looking for moral authority, for clarity.
So the suggestion is to align the descriptive language with the seriousness of the theological framework.
You have to. You need to respect your own argument enough to use language that actually supports it.
Okay, so let's get concrete. How do we swap out these insults for something that fits?
Let's take the phrase, getting back to dingbat candy. That has to go. Instead, you could use phrasing that reflects the spiritual argument. Something like, returning to the unfounded accusations made by Owen.
It's cleaner, sharper. It keeps the focus on the behavior, not just name-calling.
Right. And what about the stronger stuff like nutjob or sycophant?
You replace those with descriptors that actually fit the biblical narrative you've already introduced. Instead of nut job, you could say behavior that sows confusion and suspicion, or actions that lack integrity.
Yes, that maintains the moral high ground that was established by that Matthew Meyer quote they used. It tells the audience, I am judging this behavior by a standard of truth, not just I don't like her.
That's such a crucial distinction. It shifts the entire script from being an attack to being a critique, and it actually makes the condemnation stronger because it feels objective.
Precisely. Now, speaking of the arguments themselves, the script lists a whole series of grievances. You have the defense of a widow against murder accusations, the defense of Graham Allen against pedophilia accusations, and then a whole section about blocking people on Twitter.
Yeah, that felt like a sharp left turn. I remember reading about some user named Brita and thinking, wait, who is this? Why do I care?
And that's our third critique. The script dilutes its most serious defenses by conflating these petty social media grievances with grave moral accusations.
It feels like a prioritization issue. I mean, the central issue is defending a widow, Erika Kirk, against accusations that she was involved in her husband's murder. That's huge.
It's as serious as it gets.
And defending Graham Allen against the PDF file charge is also huge. But then we spent a significant chunk of time on the quote-unquote crime of blocking people on X.
Right. And the weakness there is that treating the act of blocking someone as this major character flaw, comparable to the other stuff, it just weakens the gravity of the whole argument.
It's like charging someone with bank robbery and jaywalking in the same indictment.
Exactly. If you tell me someone is a coward because they blocked Brida, and then you tell me they're a liar for accusing a widow of murder, I start to wonder if your sense of scale is broken.
It makes the whole thing feel like inside baseball. You know? Like if you're not part of this very specific Twitter circle, you just don't care about Brida. It gives the listener an off-ramp.
It does. If they think, oh, this is just internet drama about who blocked who, they might tune out before they even hear the serious defense of the widow.
So the suggestion is really just to edit out that social media drama, keep the focus squarely on the substantial moral and legal defenses.
I think cutting it is the best move. But let's say the author feels that the blocking is a crucial piece of evidence about the antagonist's character. Is there a way to save it?
Well, if it absolutely has to be included, you have to reframe it. You have to frame it as suppression of truth, not just a breach of social media etiquette.
Okay, I see where you're going with that. So it's not about being rude online.
No, it's about hiding evidence. For example, instead of complaining about cowardice or naming specific users, like Brita, you could say, it is not just that she blocks critics, it is that she systematically removes anyone who offers evidence against her claims.
I like that. That links the behavior back to the central theme of truth, instead of just internet drama. It stops being, she blocked my friend, and starts being, she is actively manipulating the narrative.
And that fits the theological theme much better too. Truth versus lie, light versus darkness. It elevates the point.
It does. Now let's move to the defense of Graham Allen himself. The script relies really heavily on just playing clips from Graham's own video to make its case.
It does. Graham comes on, he asks, are you sure about that, Candy? He mentions his security clearance, his adoption, and the script basically just says, boom, mic drop.
Right, and that's our fourth and final critique. The defense of Graham Allen relies too heavily on repetition of his claims rather than analyzing the strength of his evidence.
This is an interesting one because on the surface, the script is using evidence. It's using Graham's own words. But you're saying that's just not enough.
It's not enough for a commentary script, no. The weakness is that the script just repeats Allen's retort. It praises his delivery, credit to him, but it totally misses the opportunity to explain why those two factors, the security clearance and the adoption, are such robust defenses.
It assumes the audience already understands the rigor of those processes.
And that's a big assumption. Not everyone knows what goes into a security clearance. A skeptic could easily hear, I have a top secret clearance, and just think, So what? That doesn't mean you're a good person.
Right. If you just repeat the claim, you're just a cheerleader. If you explain the claim, then you're an analyst.
And that's the suggestion. Move beyond just reacting to Alan's video and actually provide the audience with the context for why his defense is objectively strong. You have to do that intellectual work for them.
So add weight to the evidence. How would we do that? Like with the security clearance, how do we explain that without getting bogged down in bureaucracy?
You just need a sentence or two. You expand on it by detailing how invasive it is. Instead of just quoting him, you explain. As Graham notes, a top-secret clearance involves background checks far more invasive than any internet sleuthing could ever be, making it highly unlikely such a history would be missed.
You could even add that investigators interview neighbors, ex-spouses, former employers.
That immediately makes the defense feel so much stronger. It appeals to logic, to procedure, not just to character.
And what about the adoption argument?
Same logic. The script just says, you know the scrutiny, but maybe the listener doesn't know. So you have to explicitly detail it. The home studies and criminal background checks required for adoption serve as third-party verification of his record, objectively countering this baseless accusation.
By adding those sentences, you turn a he said, she said situation into a he has objective government-verified proof situation.
Precisely. It solidifies the defense completely. It shows the audience that these accusations aren't just rude. They are, based on the vetting this man has undergone, factually improbable. And that is a much more powerful argument than just calling the accuser a dingbat.
It really does all come back to that idea of elevation, doesn't it?
It does. I think that's the key theme running through all of our feedback. We want to elevate the structure by removing the friction of that book plug. We want to elevate the tone by removing the insults.
Elevate the stakes by cutting the petty Twitter drama.
And elevate the argument by actually explaining the weight of the evidence.
When you put it that way, the changes don't seem like they take the fun out of the script at all. I think sometimes writers worry that if they become too professional, they'll lose their voice.
It's a common fear. But in this case, the author's voice is actually being drowned out by all these distractions. The core of this script is a really passionate defense of truth and a condemnation of what they see as hypocrisy. That's a strong, compelling voice.
The dingbats and the book plugs and the Twitter stuff, it's all just noise. It's preventing that voice from being heard clearly. I agree. If the author makes these changes, the righteous anger in the script will actually burn hotter because it'll be more focused.
Let's think about that section with the widow Erika Kirk again. If we cut out all the Breda stuff, we suddenly have more time to focus on her.
That's a great point. The script mentions her, but she almost gets a bit lost in the defense of Graham Allen. By cutting the Twitter drama, the author could spend another 30 seconds reinforcing just how damaging these accusations are to a grieving woman.
Exactly. And that reinforces the biblical lens again. Defending the widow is a core biblical concept. Complaining about being blocked on Twitter is not. By reallocating that time, the script becomes more consistent with its own stated values.
And honestly, going back to the book plug, I think that the thematic integration option is going to be the winner.
I think so too. It's such a smart play. Graham is showing resilience, a topic I cover in The Path of an Eagle. It just flows. It makes the author sound smart, and it makes the viewer feel like they're getting bonus value.
It's seamless. It's a win-win.
It is. So to recap for the listener then, first, fix the hook by integrating or moving the book plug.
Then clean up the language so the tone is consistent. Cut the petty stuff to focus the argument.
And finally, explain the evidence to make the defense ironclad.
That's the roadmap. This critique has really focused on those 4 key areas. Removing that structural friction from the promotion, aligning the vocabulary with the script's theological tone, filtering out the social media grievances, and deepening the analysis of the defensive evidence.
It might sound like a lot of work, but honestly, it's mostly about pruning, just cutting the bad words, cutting the distractions, and letting those strong arguments breathe.
To the author of this script, you have a powerful engine here. The passion is undeniable, and your moral compass is pointing in the right direction. You just need to clear some of the debris off the road so the car can actually drive.
I'd love to see the next draft. Specifically, I really want to see how they handle that security clearance explanation. If they can nail that, the whole video is going to level up.
I agree. We invite you to refine the script with these focal points. And please submit the next draft for further review. We're excited to see where you take this.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks for listening to The Critique.
See you next time.